He was a man marked by integrity, honored on earth and watched in heaven. A life overflowing with blessing, a name respected in every gate. But in a single moment, the world he knew was torn apart. His wealth vanished, his children gone, his body struck with agony. Friends turned to accusers, his wife turned to despair.
Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die.
And the heavens?
For skin, a man will give all he has for his own life.
Yet in the dust and ashes, when all strength failed, one truth remained.
I was born with nothing, and when I die, I will take nothing with me. God has given and God has taken away. May his name be praised.
Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. The storm raged, the questions multiplied, and the darkness pressed in. But from the whirlwind, God answered.
Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge?
Not with explanations, but with revelation. The one who laid the foundations of the earth stepped into the suffering of one man. And when the trial had passed, the dawn broke brighter than the night. His wounds became wisdom, his loss became testimony, his pain became a door to greater glory. This is the story of faith that fire could not consume, a heart the storm could not break, a man who found God in the ashes. This is the story of Job, a man of unbroken faith.
In the ancient land of Uz, there lived a man named Job, a figure of unparalleled righteousness and prosperity. His days were marked by immense wealth, with vast herds of livestock dotting the landscape and a large, loving family that filled his home with joy. Job was not just a man of earthly riches, he was a man of deep and unwavering faith. Each morning, he would rise to offer sacrifices and prayers, dedicating his life and his family to God, living in a state of constant humble worship.
God is gracious.
Have you ever seen God, Papa?
Experience his glory in everything, as he reveals himself in various forms.
In a heavenly council, God himself spoke of Job's integrity, holding him up as a perfect and upright man who feared God and shunned evil. However, a challenger emerged from the assembly, Satan,
Job, my servant, is righteous.
arguing that his faith was merely a transaction, a byproduct of the blessings and protection God had showered upon him.
Does Job fears God for nothing? Strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.
Confident in his servant's faithfulness, God granted Satan permission to put Job to the test. He could take away everything Job possessed, his wealth, his servants, and even his children, but he was forbidden from laying a hand on Job's own body. The trial began with devastating speed. A messenger, breathless and panicked, rushed to Job with terrible news. Sabaean raiders had stolen his oxen and donkeys, slaughtering the servants who tended them. Before the shock could even settle, another messenger arrived. He spoke of a terrifying fire that had fallen from the sky, consuming Job's sheep and the shepherds watching over them. The calamities continued to mount without pause. A third messenger appeared, his face a mask of fear, reporting that Chaldean raiders had carried off all the camels and killed their keepers. In a matter of moments, the foundations of Job's immense fortune had crumbled into dust, his life's work obliterated by forces beyond his control. Just as Job began to process the staggering loss of his wealth, the final, most soul-crushing blow was delivered. A fourth and final messenger, the lone survivor of the catastrophe, stumbled before him. He recounted a scene of celebration turned to tragedy. A mighty wind had swept in from the desert and struck the house where Job's children were feasting, causing it to collapse upon them. All were lost. In one horrific instant, the laughter of his sons and daughters was silenced forever, leaving Job utterly alone and bereft of the family he cherished more than any earthly possession. In the face of this unimaginable suffering, a lesser man would have collapsed into despair or raged against the heavens. But Job's response was one of profound, heart-wrenching piety. Overwhelmed by grief, he tore his robe and shaved his head, ancient signs of deep mourning. Yet he did not curse his fate. Instead, he fell to the ground not in defeat, but in an act of worship. With a voice choked by sorrow but steady in its conviction, he declared,
I was born with nothing, and when I die, I will take nothing with me. God has given and God has taken away. May his name be praised.
Even when stripped of everything he held dear, Job's faith did not waver. His worship remained his anchor in a storm of incomprehensible loss. The story of Job's unwavering faith continues, a tale that has echoed through millennia, questioning the very nature of suffering and divine justice. We've journeyed through his first devastating trial, where he lost his wealth, his children, and everything he held dear, yet refused to curse God. But his ordeal was far from over. The adversary, not yet satisfied, would return to test the limits of human endurance, pushing Job to the brink of despair. What happens when loss is no longer external but becomes etched into one's very flesh? This is the story of Job's second trial, a crucible of physical agony that would challenge his soul in ways unimaginable. Once again, the heavenly court convened, and among the celestial beings, Satan presented himself before the Lord. God, looking upon the steadfastness of his servant, declared to the adversary,
Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason.
But Satan, ever the skeptic, countered with a chilling proposition.
Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face.
The challenge was laid down. God, confident in Job's faithfulness, permitted the test, but with one crucial command.
Very well. Then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life.
Satan departed and unleashed a horrific affliction upon Job. He struck him with painful, agonizing sores that covered his body from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. The once great man was reduced to a pitiable state, sitting among the ashes, scraping his raw, weeping skin with a shard of broken pottery in a desperate attempt to find a moment's relief. His physical suffering was immense, a constant, tormenting fire that consumed his every waking moment. The man who once sat in the city gate as a respected elder now sat in a pile of dust, an outcast in his own land, his body a landscape of pure misery. In the midst of this torment, his wife, who had shared in all their previous losses, finally reached her breaking point. Seeing her husband in such a wretched state, her heart shattered.
Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die.
Her words were a bitter plea for an end to their shared nightmare. But Job, even in his agony, rebuked her gently.
You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?
In this profound statement, Job reaffirmed his unwavering trust, refusing to sin with his lips even when his own wife urged him to abandon his faith. News of Job's compounded tragedy traveled far, reaching his three friends: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. Bound by long-standing friendship, they made an appointment to go and comfort him. As they approached from a distance, they saw a figure sitting in the ashes but could not recognize him. The man before them was so disfigured by his suffering, so utterly broken that he was a stranger. When the horrifying realization dawned that this was their friend Job, they wept aloud, tore their robes, and sprinkled dust on their heads in a display of profound grief. Overwhelmed by the sheer depth of his anguish, they simply sat on the ground with him. For 7 days and 7 nights, not a single word was spoken, for they saw that his suffering was too great for empty platitudes or simple condolences. Their shared silence was a testament to a pain that defied all expression. Thus the stage was set for a new chapter in Job's ordeal. His physical suffering was now compounded by isolation and the silent, heavy presence of his friends. The silence would soon be broken, not by words of comfort, but by a torrent of laments, accusations, and profound philosophical debates that would form the heart of his story. Job's journey through the darkest valley of human suffering was only just beginning, a testament to the enduring power of faith in the face of inexplicable pain, a story that continues to challenge and inspire us to this day. After 7 long days of sitting in shared silent grief, the dam of Job's composure finally breaks. He doesn't curse God as Satan had predicted, but he unleashes a torrent of anguish, cursing the very day he was born. In a poetic and heart-wrenching lament, he questions the purpose of his existence, asking why light was given to one in misery and life to the bitter of soul. His words paint a vivid picture of a man drowning in despair, not in anger at God, but in the sheer weight of his suffering. He longs for the oblivion of death, a place where the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest. This initial cry is not one of rebellion, but of utter desolation, a plea for an answer to the question that haunts every suffering soul. Why? This raw expression of pain marks the end of his friend's compassionate silence. Eliphaz the Temanite is the first to speak, and his words, though couched in seeming wisdom, land like stones on Job's wounded spirit. He begins gently, almost hesitantly, but quickly moves to his central argument.
God is just, and suffering is a direct consequence of sin.
He posits that the righteous do not perish and the innocent are not destroyed. From his perspective, Job's immense suffering must be proof of some equally immense, albeit hidden, transgression. He recounts a mystical vision, a spirit that whispered in the night, reinforcing the idea of human impurity before a holy God. Eliphaz's counsel is simple and to him self-evident.
Appeal to God, repent of your secret sins, and your fortunes will be restored.
For Job, this counsel is not a comfort but a profound betrayal. He looks at the men who came to mourn with him and sees not supporters but accusers. His response is filled with anguish and a burning sense of injustice.
My suffering is overwhelming, and instead of comforting me, your words only deepen my pain.
Job passionately defends his integrity, insisting that his life has been blameless. The pain of his physical ailments is now compounded by the sharp sting of wrongful accusation and the deep isolation of being condemned by his closest companions. The assault on Job's character only intensifies as the other friends join the fray. Bildad the Shuhite speaks next, echoing Eliphaz's rigid theology but with a harsher, more accusatory edge. He coldly suggests that if Job's children died, it must have been because they sinned, and that God had rightly cast them away. He compares Job's arguments to a long-winded speech and urges him to accept the traditional wisdom that God does not pervert justice. Then Zophar the Naamathite enters, delivering the most brutal critique yet. He mocks Job's claims of innocence, sneering that God is actually punishing him far less than his iniquity truly deserves. The circle of friends has now fully transformed into a tribunal, each one building a case against Job based on their unwavering belief in a simple, transactional universe. The scene closes on a powerful and tragic tableau. Job, a man broken in body and spirit, sits surrounded by his accusers, his face turned toward the heavens. He is utterly alone, feeling abandoned by the God he has faithfully served and betrayed by the friends he trusted. Yet amidst this crushing isolation, a flicker of defiance remains. He refuses to lie, to confess to sins he has not committed just to satisfy his friend's simplistic theology or to bargain for relief. This unwavering commitment to his own truth, even when it leaves him completely isolated, sets the stage for the next, most dramatic phase of his journey. His audacious and unprecedented demand to confront God directly and plead his case before the judge of all the earth. For 3 long cycles of debate, Job and his friends have gone around in circles, their words spinning into a vortex of grief, accusation, and self-defense. But as their arguments trail off into an exhausted silence, a new voice cuts through the tension. A young man named Elihu, who had been listening quietly this whole time, can no longer contain his frustration. He had held his tongue out of respect for his elders, but their failure to provide a true answer has ignited a righteous anger within him. He is angry at Job for justifying himself rather than God. And he is equally furious with the 3 friends for condemning Job without actually refuting him, failing to truly vindicate God's honor. He declares that,
I am young in years, and you are old. That is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought age should speak. Advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is the spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty, that gives him understanding.
he completely dismisses that all suffering is a direct punishment for past sin. This, he argues, is a shallow understanding of God's ways. Instead, Elihu proposes a revolutionary idea. Suffering can be a form of divine discipline, a preventative measure from a loving God. It is not always about retribution for something you've already done. Sometimes it's a merciful warning intended to save you from future sin or from the destructive path of pride. He suggests that God uses hardship to get our attention, to pull us back from the brink when we can no longer hear his voice through other means. In Elihu's view, pain has a profound purpose. It is one of God's many languages, a tool used to communicate with humanity when other methods fail. For God speaks in one way and in two, though man does not perceive it, he proclaims. He describes how God can come to a person in a dream or a vision of the night, or through the chastening of pain on their bed, all to turn a man from his deed and to hide pride from a man. This is a God who is actively involved, using trials not to crush but to correct and redeem. It is a far more compassionate and complex portrait of the divine than the one painted by Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who saw God merely as a cosmic judge settling old scores. While the friends ultimately failed to defend God's justice, Elihu becomes God's passionate champion. He shifts the entire focus of the conversation away from Job's personal suffering and his demands for a hearing. Instead, Elihu directs everyone's attention upward, toward the absolute majesty, unwavering justice, and perfect character of God. He rebukes Job not for his pain, but for his presumption in questioning the Almighty. Elihu argues that God is far too great to be unjust and that his ways are beyond human comprehension. His speech is not an attack on Job, but a powerful defense of God's sovereignty and righteousness, reminding everyone present of the infinite gap between the Creator and the created. As Elihu's speech swells to its climax, his words begin to mirror the world around them. He gestures toward the sky, describing God's magnificent power over the elements, the formation of the clouds, the roll of the thunder, and the flash of the lightning. He speaks of the storm as a manifestation of God's power, an instrument of either judgment or blessing. His powerful oration on the God of the storm acts as a dramatic prelude. As he speaks, the air grows heavy and the sky begins to darken. A wind picks up, swirling dust around the weary men. Elihu's speech is not just the end of the human debate. It is the overture for the divine appearance, setting the stage for God himself to finally answer from the heart of the whirlwind.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more inspiring stories. Shall we begin the story?
In the desolate expanse where Job had endured so much, the air itself began to change. The sky, once a pitiless blue, gathered a deep and unsettling darkness. A great whirlwind began to form, not a storm born of natural forces, but a terrifying manifestation of divine power. Job and his friends, their heated debate silenced, could only gaze upward in awe and terror. The swirling vortex was a physical presence, a conduit between the heavens and the earth, and from its heart, a voice was about to speak. A booming voice imbued with the authority of the cosmos thundered from the heart of the storm, addressing Job directly.
Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge?
The voice was not angry, but it held an unchallengeable power that shook the very ground.
Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me.
The long-awaited divine response had finally arrived, but it was not the explanation Job had demanded. It was a challenge. God did not justify his actions or explain the reason for Job's suffering. Instead, he unleashed a torrent of questions designed to reveal the vast gulf between divine wisdom and human understanding.
Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?
The voice asked.
Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Who stretched the measuring line across it? On what were its bases set?
God's questions painted a picture of a universe intricately and masterfully designed. The divine interrogation continued, highlighting God's effortless control over all of creation.
Have you commanded the morning since your days began?
God asked, illustrating his dominion over the cycle.
Have you caused the dawn to know its place? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you? Here we are.
He then turned to the animal kingdom, a world operating entirely outside human influence. Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the young lions? The questions revealed a world teeming with life, from the majestic lion to the soaring eagle, all sustained and governed by God's decree alone, functioning according to a purpose far beyond human comprehension. As a final testament to his creative power, God described two magnificent and untamable creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan. These were not ordinary animals, but awe-inspiring beasts, pinnacles of creation whose might no human could ever hope to challenge or control. Behemoth, with bones like bronze and limbs like iron, and the fearsome Leviathan, whose scales were like a shield and whose breath could kindle coals, served as living symbols of the awesome and untamable aspect of God's power, a power that is both beautiful and terrifying. Faced with this overwhelming display of divine majesty, Job was profoundly humbled. The questions were not meant to be answered, but to reframe his perspective. All his arguments, his righteous demands for justice dissolved in the face of a reality so much larger and more complex than he had ever imagined. He finally understood his place. Covering his mouth in a gesture of submission, he answered the Almighty.
Surely I spoke of things I did not understand.
He confessed, his voice no longer defiant but filled with reverent awe.
My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes.
Job's true healing began not with an explanation, but with a transformative encounter with the infinite. Welcome back to our series exploring the profound narratives of the Bible. In our previous installment, we witnessed Job's humbling encounter with God in the midst of a whirlwind, a dialogue that reshaped his understanding of divine wisdom and power. Today we arrive at the final chapter of his story, a powerful testament to faith, forgiveness, and divine restoration. As the mighty storm recedes and a quiet calm settles over the land, the voice of God speaks once more. This time, however, it is not directed at Job, but at his friend Eliphaz. With righteous authority, God rebukes him and his two companions, declaring,
Eliphaz, I am displeased with you and your two friends, for you did not speak rightly of me, as my servant Job did.
The friends who had presumed to speak for God now stand corrected by God himself. Their well-intentioned but flawed counsel is laid bare, and they are shown the gravity of misrepresenting the divine nature. In a stunning turn of events, God instructs the three friends on the path to their forgiveness. They must take 7 bulls and 7 rams, go to Job, and offer a burnt offering for themselves. But their atonement is incomplete without one crucial act. Job must pray for them. God proclaims, My servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer. We then see the humbled friends, their faces etched with remorse, bringing their sacrifices to the very man they had condemned. Job, in an act of profound grace and forgiveness, raises his hands and intercedes for them, demonstrating a spirit fully restored and aligned with God's mercy. Immediately following Job's prayer for his friends, the tide of his life turns dramatically. The Lord blesses the latter part of Job's life more than the first. A breathtaking montage unfolds, showing his fortunes being restored twofold. The once barren pastures now teem with life, filled with 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. A magnificent new home rises from the earth, and all his relatives and former acquaintances return, not with accusations, but with comfort, gifts of silver, and rings of gold, celebrating his renewed prosperity. Beyond material wealth, God restores the deep personal loss Job had endured. He is blessed with a new family, 7 sons and 3 daughters. The narrative pauses to name his daughters, Jemima, Keziah, and Karen Happuch, noting that nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as they. In a progressive act for the time, Job gives them an inheritance along with their brothers, a sign of his deep love and God's abundant favor. Our final scene settles on a peaceful, sun-drenched landscape. A much older, white-haired Job sits serenely, his face filled with contentment, surrounded by generations of his descendants. The story concludes that Job lived for another 140 years, long enough to see his children, his children's children, even to the 4th generation. He died, the scripture says, old and full of days. His life a complete and powerful circle of suffering, faith, and ultimate restoration. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the book of Job. We hope this story has offered you a deeper perspective on faith in the face of suffering. Please subscribe for more explorations into the timeless stories that have shaped our world.